My name is Dr. Grace Telesco.
My name is Dr. Grace Telesco.
My name is Dr. Grace Telesco. I'm joined by Dr. Teresa Lily White,
Dr. Lenore Walker, Mr. Ed Denzel.
Investigation with Dr. T is something that actually was the brainchild of our dean, Dr. Durham. And now, coming up this next season, we're going to be doing it almost weekly, a weekly show on a Thursday night. So lots of really cool guests. It's not just police topics, it's not just corrections topics, but it's topics that are affecting us in kind of all areas. But one of the things that we hope to get across is raising awareness, educating about some of these really important topics like human trafficking, topics like disasters. We did a show, Confessions of a Serial Killer. So for this upcoming season, we've got a couple of really cool things. We're going to have a day in the life of a DEA agent. Another really cool one, which is really close to my heart, is going to be on September 11th. Because not only do we want to talk about 9/11 and the work of the NYPD, but I also want to really look at the mental health outcomes. We also have the human trafficking panel. We are going to bring back our Brevard Sheriff, Sheriff Wayne Ivey. It's always a pleasure to have him on. We're going to have Unfound again, Ed Denzel. He'll be coming back a few times, and that's going to be really exciting and interesting too.
So welcome everybody again, Dr. Grace Telesco, and we are live streaming from the Abraham Fischler College of Education and School of Criminal Justice YouTube channel. Tonight we have a very, very exciting show for you, exciting program for you. We have three very important guests from the Florida Alliance Against Human Trafficking, and I'm going to introduce each one of them separately. And then I'm going to have them tell us a little bit about themselves. I want to start with Savannah Parvu. She's a survivor, leader, and speaker. And Savannah has a passion for writing and speaking about the hope that she has found after many years of abuse. She's involved in survivor leadership through active prevention and awareness activities, and routinely shares her experiences with the public to grow knowledge of the tragic issue of familial trafficking within the commercial sex trafficking arena. She's a nationally recognized speaker on the subject. She's won awards from anti-human trafficking organizations for her efforts. Savannah has become one of the foremost voices on human trafficking at the state capitol. And in 2019, Savannah was appointed by Attorney General Ashley Moody to the board of directors for Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking. She's lived a life of abuse, and she refuses to sit back and continue to be a victim. The wounds from her past are being healed, and it's her desire to be a voice for the voiceless. I'm going to ask Savannah to please share her camera with us now. Welcome, 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 Savannah. Our next guest is Assistant Special Agent in Charge for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for the Fort Myers region that spans across 10 counties in Florida. Tracy Maurer oversees criminal investigations related to organized crime, narcotics, public integrity, cyber crimes, domestic security, crimes against children, and human trafficking. Tracy, thank you for joining us tonight. And I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Maurer, yes?
Maurer, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Maurer. Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm gonna, by the end, I'm gonna get it right. Special Agent Zach Hughes is a 6-year veteran of the 3rd Brigade, 82nd Airborne Division as an infantryman. He deployed to Operation Southern Watch in Kuwait, Multinational Force Observers Mission in Egypt, Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. Thank you for your service, sir. And numerous local, national, and international training events. He held a variety of duty positions from automatic rifleman to weapons squad leader and unit armor. And he's also an Eagle Scout. He's a special agent with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement he began his law enforcement career with the Marion County Sheriff's Office. He began working for FDLE in August of 2021 and was assigned to the Special Investigations Bureau as a task force officer with the FBI. He served as a field training officer, crisis negotiator, mobile field force team member during his career. And he was introduced at the University of Florida as a social justice advocate that just happens to be a cop. I love that line. That's awesome. We have a lot in common. My PhD is in social work, and so I'd like to consider myself also a social justice advocate that used to be a cop. So Zach never expected to be in this position in his professional life, but the combination of cases and training and passion got him there. He was awarded in 2014 the Bill Rutherford Award for his work on human trafficking prevention in Marion County. He was named the 2015 Detective of the Year, partially due to his work in the field of human trafficking. He came to FDLE in 2021 to continue his work on human trafficking issues in the Tampa Bay region. And he's married with 3 young daughters. He has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from St. Leo. He got his master's degree in criminal justice, specializing in critical incident management from St. Leo also, and completed the classwork for his PhD in public administration from Capella University. Please, thank you. And let's welcome all 3 of our guests. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Tracy. And thank you, Savannah, for being here. So, as a good, I feel like as a good educator, it's like really important for me to like operationally define for our audience and our viewers, many of whom are either our students at Nova, Southeastern University, or Alpha Phi Sigma members, and maybe some other stragglers, and we welcome them also. But for our viewers at home, what would you use as a nice definition for human trafficking? And I think that prior to the show starting, Tracy said Zach, she was going to throw Zach under the bus. So we're throwing him under the bus, and he is going to tell us a little bit. I'm going to spotlight him for a minute. If he could just kind of give us a definition, a working definition, if you will, of what is human trafficking and the many aspects of this phenomenon.
Thank you, Doctor. So generally speaking, the use of, we get our definition as an amalgamation from statutes, U.S. code, how the academic community defines it for their research. But generally speaking, human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to compel servitude in the commercial sex industry or forced labor. When we look at it on the big picture, generally speaking, for law enforcement, we have 3 types of trafficking. We have adult sex trafficking, in which we have to prove, is that part of the elements of the crime, force, fraud, or coercion to compel servitude in the commercial sex industry. For a juvenile, we do not have to prove the force, fraud, and coercion. There's an automatic assumption that because we're dealing with a juvenile, they can't give consent to these sex acts to begin with. As long as there is a juvenile involved in a commercial sex act, then it's automatically going to be human trafficking. And lastly is going to be labor trafficking. We're still going to need to prove force, fraud, or coercion to compel servitude. And there's a bunch of different subcategories and things like that that are involved. But with a really big paintbrush, that's a generally well-accepted definition of human trafficking, that's cross spectrum right now.
Great. And so, Zach, you've worked on many cases. Is there anything that you can tell our viewers in terms of the uniqueness of our geography here in South Florida? Is anything that's special, at risk, a particular dynamic down here in South Florida?
So I haven't done any on the ground investigations in South Florida. Where I'm, probably the biggest case, or not the biggest case, probably the most impactful case I've had actually came out of Marion County. And that's, we set some case law for the state with it, a couple other things. So I haven't done a boots on the ground work in South Florida. Okay. I don't want to paint myself that I have. But generally speaking, based on the volume of population you have down there, you're going to have human trafficking. Human trafficking is an enormous money-making business. So where people gather, you're going to have it.
Yeah. Tracy, can I ask you to come on a minute? I'm going to give you a softball pitch now. Don't worry.
Okay.
Just, I'm going to spotlight you. So, can you tell us anything about the cases that you've been involved in, shedding light a little bit on sort of behind the scenes for our viewers?
I think the most important thing to point out is that human trafficking cases are very tough on the victim as well, right? Because every time they have to retell their story, they're basically being victimized again. So we have to approach it very softly with our victims. We have to help them through the recovery efforts, but we also need to prosecute the bad actors. So I give a lot of credit to the victims who have to tell their story over and over again, and they really are the backbone of the cases.
And how would you say, because I think that you both have, some narcotics investigation background in your history, yes? A little bit, somewhat. But I mean, you're law enforcement officers, and that narcotics sale is an amazing enterprise. It makes millions and millions and millions, billions, if not billions of dollars. What makes it different in terms of trafficking humans versus trafficking narcotics?
So first thing I would point out is they sort of go hand in hand. A lot of the victims of sex trafficking are also addicted to narcotics, and their bad actors will use that against them to victimize them. So it's really important to understand the association between the two. But ultimately, they both boil down to an enterprise where somebody is seeking profit off of you.
And anything you want to add on that, Zach?
I mean, I think the important thing to kind of the takeaway is that, ASAC Maurer is very much right. There is very much a link between narcotics and human trafficking, and it's occurring, for multiple reasons. But part of that reason is a coping mechanism for the victim. Unfortunately, a lot of the victims I've talked to and interviewed, they're using narcotics because of what is occurring to them. It's a way for them to numb that experience. But I think, the question is, how are those things tied? And I think the way I explain it in other places is this, if I'm going to sell a kilo of cocaine, sooner or later, that kilo of cocaine is going to run out. I'm going to have to go buy more. With a human being, we're going to be able, our traffickers can sell them repeatedly for a long period of time. They typically will last longer and to a higher volume than that kilo of cocaine will. And that's why the victimization is just different. I think it's really important to understand that, yes, there's a tie, but there's apples with narcotics trafficking and there's oranges with human trafficking. A lot of people want to have this big correlation. And while there's reasons they're tied together, but those are really very separate things. And we've kind of got, while we can use some of the same tactics, techniques, and practices to investigate those cases, we are dealing with different things. Yes, there's money involved, but at the end of the day, we're going to have, a victim take the stand potentially in a courtroom, point across a courtroom to the bad actor and detail for a jury, this is all the stuff that has happened to me. This is all the stuff this person did to me. This is why this person did that stuff to me. This was the force when, and our prosecutors are going to lay that out for the jury. But I think that's a big difference.
So what makes the investigation so difficult or challenging in terms of human trafficking cases?
I think the biggest challenge that I see very consistently is getting the victim to engage, trust, and then disclose. Talk and trust to law enforcement about their experience, so that we can find the collaborative corroborative evidence to build a really, really good case. We don't ever want to build a case just on a victim statement, because that makes a lot ride on that survivor, that victim. We want to get every single piece of information that we can get to collaborate their story, so that we're not putting that whole case just on a victim testimony. We want to use, communication records, advertisement, email records, everything we can to support that survivor.
Okay. Savannah, can I ask you to come on, and I'm going to spotlight you as well, so that all four of us will be spotlighted here. Just let me grab that 1 second. Gotcha. Okay. So Savannah, tell us if you can, we're talking a lot about the victim, and that, the investigation and the prosecution sort of lie heavily upon the victim, and it has a tendency to be re-victimizing. I'm sure that if you come across folks like Tracy and Zach, that makes it easier to have a rapport with folks like that they are. I could tell already. I don't really know them, but I could tell that they probably make whoever they're interacting with feel very comfortable. But Savannah, can you shed any light from where you sit on what investigations are like, what the dynamics of trafficking is like? Anything that you feel comfortable sharing with us?
Well, I haven't been part of any investigations. Like my case, I didn't talk about it for a couple of years after it happened. And a lot of it happened when I was younger, and there wasn't even a such thing as human trafficking. Well, not by the law anyway. So I'm not very familiar with the process. I mean, I know people who have gone through it, but I know a lot of the survivors I know, their cases never went to trial, because by the time they talked about it, they weren't in a place, well, when they came out of it, they weren't in a place where they would talk about it and go through a trial. So a lot of them, they didn't go that far.
What would be the reason for that?
Well, I know, like, for me, I wouldn't talk to law enforcement or anything. Like, I interacted with them a lot because my parents did drugs, and so they were in the house all the time. And then when I went to foster care, I interacted with them there too, but I wouldn't talk to them about anything because I was always told not to talk about it. I was always afraid that something would happen to my mom and it would be my fault, or like I was always put in fear not to talk about it. So anytime I was asked questions by law enforcement, I would deny anything that happened.
And Tracy or Zach, that is that typical of victims? That sort of characteristic and dynamic? Tracy or Zach?
Go first, and then I'll go.
So I got involved in trafficking because of I was a rookie patrol officer in Ocala, and came across a family dynamic. Unfortunately, very much kind of what Savannah's alluded to was going on in her home. I did everything I could to help that young lady. And one day when I was standing there with her, she told me, she said, "Deputy Hughes, I'm never going to tell you what my dad did to me. I've been told my whole life not to talk to cops." So unfortunately, in some of these cases, yes, ma'am. That isn't unusual. I think to say it isn't unusual is a bad way to say it. I think it's not unusual to hear that kind of information. There is some of the familial influence, how people are raised, all those things. Those do impact our ability to help them sometimes. So we may have to talk to them 7, 8 times to build that rapport to the place that they trust us, that they will make those disclosures to us.
Tracy?
So I was going to say the first thing is that the victim needs to feel safe, right? They need to feel like they're in a safe environment to talk to you and they are away from the trafficker. And the second thing is really on the law enforcement officers and building rapport with the victims. They have to feel comfortable sharing their story with you because it's a very personal, dramatic, tragic experience that they've been through or experiences. So it's really incumbent on the officers to see that the victims get the services they need. They feel comfortable talking to you and sharing the story and really building that rapport, like Agent Hughes said.
So Savannah, in your bio, you talk about familial trafficking. Do you feel comfortable telling us what that is and what your experience with that was?
Yeah, so familial trafficking obviously involves a family member who is trafficking another family member. For me, it was I grew up with both my parents were drug addicts and alcoholics, and I was told before I started school not to talk about the things that happened at home or I'd be taken to a bad place. So I learned early on not to talk about anything. And then my mother got involved with more drugs, and she started prostituting herself for her drugs. And she was very open with me about what she was doing. This was started when I was around the age of 10 or 11. And there were times that I would go with her and I would wait for her to be done and get her drugs. And there was a time when I was 11 that I went with her, and her drug dealer offered her a $10 piece of crack for me instead of for her. And so she told him that that was fine. He could do whatever he wanted. So he took and sold me to other people. And from then on, it happened on a regular basis between the age of 11 and 13, until I ended up going to foster care when I was 13 because both of my parents tried to commit suicide. And I ultimately continued being trafficked while I was in foster care because some of the staff there were friends with my trafficker. So it continued while I was there.
Savannah, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. I'm so blown away by the fact that you've taken that experience and that trauma and how that's informed your work now is really powerful. That's, that you're helping other people, that you're educating about it. That's something, Tracy and Zach, that Savannah's wasn't like placing herself at risk. She was already at risk, right? Because of where she was living, and this was her family, and she was only 11 years old. Do you see that a lot in these cases where the victim's vulnerability plays a major role?
So I think I'm sorry, ASAC, is it okay if
You go right ahead.
Okay. So I would say that, when we as law enforcement, what we're looking for, if we think about it like behavior evidence, or you may read some of the academic journals, what are the pathways to trafficking? We're looking for those points of vulnerability. And most often, the victims I interact with, when we talk about their history, their past, we very consistently find an early exposure to drugs and alcohol, early exposure to sex assault, history of running away, a history of being in foster care or inside the system. Those are things we find in their history very, very consistently, because all of those factors play into their sense of self-worth, their sense of self-confidence, those kind of things. So it may not be a situation like like Savannah described it occurred to her, but all those things make people vulnerable, and those vulnerabilities can be exploited, later on by bad actors, traffickers, in any number of ways. Not just trafficking, but those are things that set up, bad relationships that may not be trafficking, they may be other things, but those background, historical issues certainly contribute to the likelihood of someone being victimized significantly higher.
Tracy?
Well, traffickers tend to go after people who are vulnerable. And by the nature of it, a child is vulnerable, right? You expect your parents, you expect your caregivers, you expect your teachers to look out for you. And sometimes they don't. And unfortunately for Savannah, she did not have that parental involvement that was looking out for her, or the foster care system, unfortunately. But they will prey on the vulnerable. They will prey on women who maybe are seeking attention, people who are in need of basic necessities. They will prey on people who are looking for money. There are many, many ways that they identify their potential victims, and it basically boils down to looking after the vulnerable people.
Savannah, is there anything that you can add in terms of the work that you are involved in now, and your interaction with other victims and what you hear from their experiences, in terms of what made them vulnerable? So what were the vulnerable categories? A lot Tracy and Zach have already mentioned. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
A lot of the survivors that I know, they had, it wasn't necessarily their parents that they had, like they, not all of them necessarily had a bad childhood, but a lot of them did. A lot of them were, um, like looking for somebody to love them, or just some type of attention from people. Some people felt like their family was too good for them, and so they struggled with different things from peer pressure that eventually led them into trafficking, because they were ashamed of things that they did in their past. There's many different things.
So, is there a particular demographic or a who is more likely to be victimized or who is more likely to be targeted? Is there any kind of like breakdown, gender, race, socioeconomic status, anything like that? Zach's shaking his head no. So tell us, Zach, what it runs the gamut. It's really there's no one indicator.
No, so I can't. I have never been able to provide. I've gotten that question off and on. I have never been able to give a profile based on physical appearance. It is a profile based on those risk factors, that I was just talking about. What is in their history, and so I have to agree with Savannah. These are words and terms that I use when I train other law enforcement officers, and we talk about that. Is they're victims are vulnerable because they're looking for those higher order level things. They're looking for love, affection, all those things that as a human being we want. They're looking for those things, and then sometimes they're desperate for those things in their life. But for me to say, oh, it's always going to be it will, a Hispanic female between 13 to 17 in, with a median income. I can't give you that because I honestly, I don't know the statistic to give that to you. My experience, I have worked with, males, females, young, old, mothers, young people. It goes across the board. So I think I think that there is a national narrative that certainly says that most often our human trafficking victims are Caucasian females. Most often our traffickers are going to be a minority male, and most often our buyers of sex are going to be middle-aged, beer gut, heavy-set white guys, like people that look like me. And unfortunately, that is I think that damages our efforts in human trafficking because that's not what it looks like. I think from my perspective, it is those demographics are not a way to define a victim at all, or a survivor. It's not a way to define that. I think anybody can be a victim of trafficking, just like traffickers don't look just like any one thing. They're not any gender, any race, anything like that. Vulnerabilities. I think ASAC Maurer said it best. A trafficker is going to look for someone's vulnerabilities. They're going to play to that so that they can be exploited.
So would you go ahead? Sorry, Tracy, go ahead.
I was just going to add on that you shouldn't have any predisposed ideas of what a trafficker is or what a victim is. So law enforcement should be mindful not to assume that somebody is the suspect or somebody is the victim based on like things that Agent Hughes was saying, their age, their race, their body type, whatever it's going to be. Anything goes. You really never know, and you shouldn't be judging until you have all the facts.
Is it safe to say though that females are more likely than males to be victimized, or is that not true?
I would say that is something that's still under investigation. I know that there are some some peers of Savannah's, some male peers of Savannah's that are very bravely talking about these things. Having met some of them, what I find very interesting is that they all say the same thing. I was purchased for sex just as much by women as I was by men. They say these things. And I think in some ways, just based on our society, sometimes the men and the boys are overlooked. So we do have to do a better job of that. I think the LGBTQ community is at risk for a whole different set of unique reasons. So those are all things that we kind of, the ASAC Maurer said it best. We cannot be predisposed to a physical appearance to determine victimization or perpetratorhood. We can't. It's not fair to anybody in that equation. Is there probably some statistic out there that'll tell, it's most often going to happen to women and children? Probably somewhere. I don't keep track of those stats anymore. I'm too busy. I have real cases to work, for me to chase those stats. But I think anytime we push ourselves in the corner of most often, most likely, we give the opportunity to miss stuff. So we have to keep an open mind.
So you're saying that a lot of the male victims are overlooked. Savannah, from where you sit and from your interaction with your colleagues and other victims, what's the reason why male victims are being overlooked?
I think the biggest thing is they're less likely to come forward.
Why is that?
Because of the amount of shame. And like, there's a lot of shame for women and girls, but for a guy to say he's sexually abused, they feel a lot more shame. They're a lot more embarrassed of the things that happened.
But when they come forward to the police, I think that police are doing a good job in terms of rapport and building trust, restoring dignity and power and security, psychological first aid techniques. I mean, the police officers that I've worked side by side with, I see them. I see them, and I know that that they're not shaming, that they're not, laughing it off in any way, shape, or form. So, do you think it's a fear of stigma, a fear of being shamed, or is it real?
I think law enforcement has gotten better with understanding and working with survivors, but it hasn't always been that way.
Okay. Well said. Tracy, did you want to add?
No, I think Savannah just hit the nail on the head. We continue to prove every day on our interactions with survivors of human trafficking, conducting interviews and building rapport, but it's something we continue to work at and train on.
Are undocumented immigrants also at a higher risk or vulnerable to trafficking, particularly maybe labor trafficking, do you think?
I believe so. I also think they're less likely to come forward for fear of immigration status.
But the truth is that if they're victims of let's say labor trafficking, and they go to the police, that they're not going to really be deported, or is that true? Is it a real fear? Is it a real fear? Is it founded in any kind of fact, or is that something that people should know that they can certainly come forward? What's the reality there, and do we even know the answer to that?
Zach, you want to go first?
Sure. I think the reality is law enforcement has some tools available to us through, the bureaucracy of immigration, that there are tools available to us that no, we don't automatically deport a victim of human trafficking. There's some finer points to it. And when I tell you I'm hitting the wave tops, I think that that's really important to understand. But law enforcement has some tools to give them relief for their immigration status, all kind of things. I haven't had my personal investigations have mostly been domestic women and children. So I haven't worked a lot of labor cases, haven't touched a lot of labor cases, haven't touched a lot of those issues, but I do know that those tools are available to me as an investigator if I need them. So there is some relief that we can provide through the bureaucracy of the immigration process.
So if there was someone who was watching for some reason or another, they're watching this investigation with Dr. T, and they are they're being trafficked right now, and they have their status is undocumented.
Mm-hmm.
what would you want to say to them?
Come talk to us. We're here to help you.
You know, one of the things we talked about was vulnerabilities. And they fall under the category of vulnerable because a trafficker will hang that over their head with the threats of being deported or sent back to where they came from, or taking away their passports or their visa or immigration documents. So they need to realize that there is a path out, and they do need to reach out to law enforcement and not to accept what the trafficker says. Traffickers will tell you anything to continue victimizing you.
Savannah, if you could talk to someone who is listening to the program right now, and they are in a situation where they're being trafficked, whether it be sex trafficking, labor trafficking, what have you, familial trafficking, as in your case, what would you say to them? How do they start?
Well, I would say to not be afraid to seek help from either an organization or law enforcement, and that, like I said, law enforcement has come a long way. I mean, if I was where I am, or if I don't even know how to say it. If I was where I was, if I was just coming out of it now, and knowing what I know about law enforcement now, I would go to law enforcement, because they have come a long way, and I've worked with some incredible law enforcement officers with doing trainings and stuff. But don't be afraid of the things that have happened to you, and the things that happen to you don't have to define you, and you can move forward and get help. There's a lot more help now, and you can move past it and have a future.
And so would you recommend that they go to the Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking, that organization? Would that be a good organization?
They could point them into the right direction to get help. Florida Alliance, more of the we're working on providing more technology to law enforcement and stuff. We don't really have anything for survivors, but it's a resource to point them in the right direction. They can get them in contact with people that can help them.
Is there one particular number that we could like put out in the YouTube chat? Justin or Layla can write it in the chat for anybody who's watching. Tracy?
So I would say that there's a lot of reporting mechanisms, and the first and foremost is 911 for an emergency. If you're currently in a situation that you need to be immediately rescued, your first call should be 911. We do have other reporting mechanisms, the Florida Human Trafficking Hotline, which is 1-855-FLA-SAFE. That tip will come in and be followed up on. You can also contact the Florida Abuse Hotline or the National Runaway Safe Line. So we do have several reporting mechanisms that do go to law enforcement, and people shouldn't feel fearful of reporting it.
Did you get that, Justin and Layla, behind the scenes?
911, then 1-855-FLA-SAFE, SAFE.
Okay, they're gonna put it in the chat right now. But I mean, 911 that's really easy to remember, that particular one. We have a lot of questions, and it's almost 7:40, and I know we have 10 more minutes before Agent Hughes has to split, take care of some business, and then he'll come back. But for now, I want to make sure that I have all the guests ready to answer questions, if that's okay with you guys. And then after the questions are answered, later on, we can just kind of wrap up, last words, tips, anything like that. So I'm going to go to Michelle Bloom, and I'm going to answer, have this answered live. Michelle, I am going to give you mic privileges, if that's all right with you. And so you have your mic privileges now, and you can answer.
Awesome. Can you hear me?
Yes.
A temper tantrum, so sorry, it took me a second. Yeah, I just had a couple questions. So I work with human trafficking victims in foster care in Tampa, and we're really struggling with placement for these kids. We get them all forward as victims. Some of them don't even articulate. They say they don't see themselves as victims. I don't know how accurate that is. Excuse me. But that's what we're seeing. And so we're really struggling with placements because they have a lot of rap sheets because of what, the life entails. And then safe houses require the kids to voluntarily go. Do you have any ideas for what we could do? Because it's not pretty. And then they go into day placements and recruit others.
Who wants to answer that question?
Zach, that's your region, but
Well, that's
under the bus on that one, but that was a Tampa question.
I think, I think the big thing is that is the same issue that we have had across the state. Almost every area I've worked in, that is finding placements for any victim of human trafficking, not just juveniles, is constantly a challenge. We flat out do not have enough beds per night for kids in foster care in the state of Florida, let alone kids who need a more secure, defined, holistic treatment options. All foster kids have a unique set of needs. Trafficking victims have a very, very unique set of needs. So finding the space for them is a challenge. And right now, to be honest with you, finding a safe place for them is a challenge for multiple reasons, mostly because, they have to go voluntary. And I hate to say this, but part of it is the expense. It's very, very expensive. And that becomes a challenge with the bureaucracy. So I wish there was an answer. I wish there was an easy answer. There isn't one that I know of, until we probably take a different stance on some things that would open up the door for a whole another 4 hours. So, but yes, it is a significant challenge. I wish there was a golden answer for that, other than to be patient, be patient, be consistent, and be honest with that population. I think that's the three biggest things that we can do: be patient, be consistent, and be honest.
Thank you. Great. Alexia, you have two paragraphs worth of questions in the in this Q&A here. So I'm going to ask you to select one good question, and then if we have time, we'll come back to you again later for the second question.
Okay, no, that works. Sorry, Dr. T.
No, you're fine. Don't be sorry. I'm just saying that it's there's a lot of questions, so pick the best one.
Right. Well, I know in the first one that I had asked, it was kind of like question on a question, just to condense it, kind of, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
But I know recently it's just become more prevalent, the word human trafficking, or the two words, human trafficking. What is the difference between that versus kidnapping, and on top of that, sexual assault, whatever not? Just because it is more recent that human trafficking has been, coming to light. So what is the difference between an offender being charged with human trafficking versus kidnapping, or are they charged with both?
Who wants to answer that question? Tracy?
On that one first. So I will tell you that there are a lot of related offenses to human trafficking, where we charge them with offenses like sexual assault, kidnapping, traveling to meet a minor. They really are crimes related to human trafficking. So just because it's not charged as human trafficking, or it's not called human trafficking, it still is what it is, right? So don't think that it doesn't exist. We just sometimes there are better charges to put on people versus human trafficking. Kidnapping, obviously, you can look up Florida state statutes, preventing a person from leaving, moving them from one place to another. Typically in human trafficking, oftentimes they've used coercion over somebody, so they are there, I don't want to say willingly, because they've been coerced into it, or they've been forced into it. But there are a whole lot of Florida state statutes that could be applicable to human trafficking cases.
Great. Okay,
Yeah, it's Kino.
Kino.
Yeah, no problem. So, my question was, so as a police officer, like, what are some signs that we should look at? I work with trolls, so I mean, I feel like most states and most cities have a lot of human trafficking. So, like, what are some signs that we should like pay attention? Like, how can we, like, I guess, pick someone out that might be a victim of human trafficking?
Who wants to answer that?
So I'll go ahead because I had a feeling that question was going to come up. So I put together a little bit of list of warning signs of human trafficking you may want to pay attention to. So we'll just go through that real quickly. A person appearing malnourished or deprived of food, water, sleep, or medical care. Somebody who's showing signs of physical injuries or abuse. Somebody who maybe is avoiding eye contact or social interaction. Maybe somebody who's lacking their official identification documents because it's been taken away from them. Somebody who maybe doesn't have personal necessities or personal possessions. Or on the flip side of that, suddenly they have more expensive or material possessions because somebody's trying to buy their affection. Maybe for labor trafficking, somebody who's working excessively long hours or sleeping at their place of employment. Maybe somebody who's checking into a hotel or motel with an older adult male. Maybe a child who's describing an adult as a boyfriend or a friend, where you would think that would not be appropriate. General signs of poor physical health or physical abuse, and maybe also tattoos or branding would be a sign of somebody's being victimized of human trafficking.
That's fabulous. That's a great checklist for law enforcement and for our criminal justice students also to be on the lookout for that. Alexia, I'm gonna let you go. So go ahead. Because then I'm gonna close the Q&A, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to the YouTube chat. So go ahead, Alexia. I think there's a really good question. So why don't you ask it, and then Michael come after you.
Okay. Sorry, there's another one because I've also noticed on, like, say, social media. So people can make fake profiles, whether it be through Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, anything like that. Do you think that social media has played a big role in the whole human trafficking, like made it easier, but then also made it easier for y'all to find people?
So Zach, before I lose you, you got 2 minutes. Go.
All right. I will squeeze out as much time as I can.
Okay.
So generally speaking, our model right now, traffickers are using most often Instagram to advertise themselves and what they're doing. Yes, they use fake profiles. Most of the cases, what we're seeing is some kind of initial contact with a trafficker on a dating website. And the list is pretty significant of those. From there, they'll use the communication platform embedded in that dating website or application, transition to something off-site, meaning, Snapchat, something like that. When I say an off-platform communication, whether it's a text message, Snapchat, whatever, I'm just using some off the top of my head. Go to face-to-face contact. Exploitation will begin, or the grooming process will begin. And then there is a lot of times what we're seeing, at least in the cases that I've worked, is some type of digital exploitation, meaning they're on webcams or doing something online, on those kind of things. And then an advertisement or business phase where they're being advertised for an illegal commercial sex act, as it moves forward. And that's, again, we have a limited amount of time. We're hitting the wave tops. So social media, yes, does it play a role? Absolutely. Again, law enforcement has techniques, and practice to move through there and do some things pretty interesting with digital communications. As long as those services are inside the United States. If they're outside the United States, it does become more of a challenge depending on the company. So all of those things play a role. But yes, social media does do that, but social media also puts out bad information. And when I say that, did I lose you?
No, you didn't lose us. We're still here.
Social media does play a role in putting out bad information. Unfortunately, those, what used to be, if you're as old as I am, what used to be the internet jokes that went around, or the email jokes, now it gets spread a lot quicker through social media. So sometimes there is bad information out there. And generally the media in general plays a role in that. And I believe, ma'am, you were the same one who asked the question about the kidnapping and that kind of stuff. I think what's important to understand is, when I started this back in the day, Taken was the big thing. That's how everybody explained human trafficking, was the movie Taken. And that's where they got their perception of human trafficking. And that was so far from the case. It wasn't there. And it's the same thing. Again, if you've got all this gray and you're as old as I am, you remember the stranger danger and parents worried about the van and all that stuff. And we know that while those things do happen, they don't happen at the rate that was probably out there when I was growing up, so it looks different. So I think social media helps and hurts. It spreads information. Law enforcement, again, it's a great tool to get missing person missing person flyers out to a very large volume of people very quickly. But again, it's such a double-edged sword that it definitely impacts all of what we do, not just human trafficking, not just law enforcement, everything.
It certainly could be a force multiplier for good or for bad. Exactly. Yep. I know you got a split. You'll come right back in as soon as you do. I'll promote you to panelist again. So I'm gonna take the spotlight away. You can close off your camera now, and we'll see you. We'll see you towards the end.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, Savannah, I have a question here from Mike, and I'm going to let Mike have his privileges. Actually, let's see. Let me disable that one. So, Mike, you're up. I'd like you to ask this question, and maybe Savannah, either Savannah or Tracy, but first Savannah will take a shot at the question regarding foreign trafficking victims, and maybe anything that Savannah has any insight on the folks that she knows who are victims that she interacts with now as part of her work. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Dr. T, and thanks the panelists. Thank you for coming forward, and thank you for telling your stories. Thank you for being on the front line of this issue. Have you been involved? Have you seen or have you been involved with foreign trafficking victims? And if so, what procedures are in place to coordinate with federal officials?
That's a good question, Mike. Savannah, any insight?
Might be more of a Tracy question, because I haven't worked with any survivors who were foreign victims.
Okay. So the survivors that you work with are all domestic?
Yes, they were all trafficked in the United States, and they're from here.
Yes. Okay. Tracy?
I have interviewed some. I would say that for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, our jurisdiction is the state of Florida. When we have boundaries that go outside of that, we work with our federal partners at the Homeland Security Investigations, FBI, and we try to work with them to take the cases overseas. So we don't just stop, but we do need to rely on our federal partners for those cases.
Mike, you have your hand up? You have a follow-up? Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. That's not a follow-up, just a comment. The only reason I ask is that many years ago when I was a young FBI agent, I was not a case agent, but I was requested to assist in the human trafficking case from one of my senior agents because of my language capabilities. And what we discovered back then was that, yes, the victims would not really want to speak to us. Certainly not a male officer, but would not want to speak to anyone at all, because where they came from in many of the locations, especially Central and South America, law enforcement was part of the problem, not part of the issues. Law enforcement assisted in bringing them forward and crossing them, taking them across lines. So just wanted to, curiosity, if you're still involved and working these issues, if this continues to be a problem.
I think there is a certain amount of distrust for law enforcement, but again, we go back to the building rapport and building the trust so they can tell us their stories.
Yeah, good question, Mike. Michelle, I'm going to give you your privileges back. I see you have a follow-up question, and then we're going to go to the YouTube chat.
Thanks. I just had one more question. I don't know if it's used everywhere. I think it's used throughout Florida, the human trafficking tool, when kids at least are picked up to determine if they are HT victims or not. Do you find that tool to be useful and accurate, or is there a better method for at least initial report investigation?
I think it's a good pointer system to start. It gets the information in and it gives us a direction to go in and where to look and to talk to the victim. So is it the end all be all? No, but it certainly is a pointer system for us to start our investigation.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm going to ask for Layla to come on. And Layla is one of our project managers, and she's behind the scenes. Is my production team behind the scenes. Going to spotlight her. Layla, we have a lot of stuff in the chat. I see the chat is blowing up like crazy, and I want to keep my attention on our guests. But you're keeping your attention on the chat questions. Are there any questions that are specific to either Savannah or Tracy that you'd like to bring up?
We have one question here. This one was asking as far as what happens with juvenile victims of labor trafficking. Do you have to prove fraud or corrosion, or is it assumed?
You mean labor trafficking or human trafficking in general?
It says labor trafficking.
You do not need to prove force, fraud, or coercion with minors.
Okay.
Okay. Any other question?
Looking through, another one says, are there any tips for citizen identification of human trafficking situations? Which is
question.
It says, are there tips for citizen identification of human trafficking situations?
It sounds like Tracy went over that when she gave the checklist. Like these are the signs to look for, that something is not right, something is not normal, and that the authorities should definitely be contacted. Right, Tracy? Would you say?
Yes, I would say that citizens should not be afraid to make that call to the hotline or to the one FLA SAFE. We'll be the ones as law enforcement who vet whether or not it is a legitimate tip or it's not. So don't think that any tip seems silly or you're unsure of yourself. Call it in and let the law enforcement officials investigate it.
Perfect.
Okay.
I think as far as the other questions, some of them were kind of already answered.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Justin to come on because I think he might have one that he'd like to bring up. Justin, let me just spotlight your video. Okay. Take it away, Justin. Who is this question for?
All right, so this question could be possibly for Savannah. You guys did cover it a little bit, but I guess they just wanted to know like more details. You guys were saying there's like tattoos and brandings to look for. So Ashley was actually asking, are there like specific tattoos to watch out for?
I know there's a lot of, especially like on the neck area, there's a lot of it can be symbols or it can be certain numbers. You know, the numbers that Alan Wilkin always talks about. I forget what they are, but they stand for something.
Tracy?
So I would say a lot of, we'll call them pimps, will brand their girls who they are selling with their name on it. So you know who they belong to. So if there's unexplained names, tattoos on someone's neck or their lower back, that is a form of branding.
Any other symbols that mean something else?
We might get to Zach when he comes back on that one.
All right. Okay, that's cool. Justin, any other questions or statements or comments?
As far for the chat, no, that's all. The rest were already answered.
Okay. All right, great. So what I'm going to do while we're waiting for Zach to maybe come back. Thank you, Justin. Thank you so much. Going to remove your spotlight now. So I'd like to like wrap up final thoughts and last words. Tracy, anything that you would like to have known out, to be put out there to viewers, to criminal justice students, to law enforcement? We have a lot of law enforcement that's on also. So anything that you usually do in your trainings that you would want to kind of summation of like, these are the important things to remember. And this is the way in which our interaction with survivors should be.
So first of all, Zach is back on. If you could let him back in.
Excellent. Thank you.
I would say that it's really incumbent on people to pay attention to their surroundings, pay attention to people they interact with. Law enforcement officers, pay attention when you do a traffic stop. Who's in the car? Are they showing signs of potentially being a victim of human trafficking? So, we have the saying in law enforcement: if you see something, say something. So if you have that suspicion or something makes the hair on your neck stand up, make the phone call and let us vet that information. It's really important. We don't know what we don't know. So without citizens coming forward or victims or survivors coming forward, we don't have the opportunity to go after the bad actors.
Great. Zach, while you were away, there was a question that came up about tattoos and special symbols, special meaning. Can you shed any light on that in terms of what you know about cases that you've investigated?
So the cases that I've worked, generally, it will be a name or initials tattooed. The best way for me to say it would be a bikini area. Most often, when we started this, when I started doing some of this stuff so long ago, very consistently, it was the same tattoo in the same place. Law enforcement has used that very, very effectively across the country. So that's kind of changed. So to say that it's any one money sign or this number of stars or anything like that would probably be very irresponsible of me at this point. I would say that as an investigator, I'm gonna talk to them about what tattoos do they have, where are they, what do they mean. I think most of the cases I've worked, what we see with a branding tattoo is it looks significantly different than every other tattoo. Based on the design, the characters, it's just going to look different. And I wish I could give you some more concrete stuff, but that's the best description I can give you.
Okay.
I think we've seen an evolution, and that's important. And I do. I know there was a brief delay there, but I want to 100% reinforce what ASAC Maurer said. If you're a cop out there, whatever you're doing, no matter if it's a DV call, a traffic stop, a suspicious person, a prowler, listen to your gut. If something's wrong, it probably is. Listen to your gut. That's the best thing you can do. And I tell people all the time, we need the public to talk to us. We need the public to have access to things that we don't as law enforcement officers. You'll find this shocking, but I don't routinely have my nails done. Actually, I'd never have my nails done.
That's not what I heard.
It wouldn't surprise me, but I say these things in jest, but you all have access to things that I don't, just because I don't go to nail salons. It's not my thing. My wife uses it. My wife doesn't go to those. So your access and watching and listening to your gut is very, very important for all of us.
Great. Thank you. Savannah, last words in terms of what survivors should do if they're involved, if they're in it, and they need help, they need to seek help. I know we've kind of said this already, call 911, call the hotline. But you are a testament to resiliency and the fact that you are a survivor, not a victim, a survivor, is empowering, right? And the work that you're involved with is so empowering for others. And you're just really you're really a courageous, powerful force. So what, if anything, would you like to say in closing for, final thoughts or, tips, words to survivors or words to criminal justice professionals?
I mean, I would just say, again, not to be afraid to reach out and get help. There's a lot of it, and there's a lot of people that want to work with survivors and that are willing to work with survivors and help you to rebuild your life after that. It's not an easy process, but it's worth it in the end.
And I'm sure that there's a lot of therapy and a lot of self-reflection, and the resiliency, it doesn't just come out of thin air. It comes from somewhere within our character. And there was a story I was told from a shaman one time, a Peruvian shaman who had gotten bit by a snake on a trek somewhere, and he was going to die. I mean, and there was a poisonous snake. So they called the chief and they called the medicine man, and everybody came, to the village to try to help him and save him. And they couldn't save him. He was going to die, and they couldn't get the poison out. And the medicine man said to him, "You're either going to die from this poison, or you're going to become a shaman as a result of it." And that always, like, really, when I heard that story, it really spoke to me in terms of my being a survivor of 9/11 and first responder at Ground Zero for a year and a half. It was my poison for so many years. It was a poison, and it was killing me until I was able to take that poison and make it into my power. And I feel like you've done that. And I just want to applaud you for that. And hopefully other victims who are survivors can hear that and, take that, whatever that poison was, that trauma. We learn how to live with it. You can't get it out of you necessarily, but you can learn how to live with it and turn it into your power. Would you say that that's what you've done? I mean, I think that's what you've done.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've done, because when I was in the situation, I wanted to know somebody else who had been through something similar and was doing well, because I didn't think it was possible. So now I want to be that person for other people.
And you are. And anyone who's watching this either live now or, I like to say on the reruns. I'm dating myself when I say that, but it's archived. So hopefully they can hear that. And that's really the case for anyone who's a survivor of any type of trauma. Really. So I want to thank you all for being here, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to help educate and raise awareness on this issue. Thank you, Savannah. Thank you so much to the two agents, to Tracy and to Zach, for your time and effort. I want to thank Layla Horton and Justin Campbell, of course, for helping us behind the scenes. And you guys can, you're released. You can, you're free to go now, or stay if you want, but you don't have to share your cameras anymore. We hope that we can get in touch with you in the future for maybe other programs.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you again, and be safe, and congratulations on all the hard work that you do, making a difference. So I'm going to ask for Layla and Justin to come on so that we can do some shameless plugging around what's next, what's coming up, because I know that there's a lot of things that are coming up. So first, Justin, and then Layla.
All right, guys. So on November 9th, we have the impact of COVID-19 on labor trafficking in the United States with special guest Dr. Anthony Matalo, who's also a NSU alum. After that, on the 16th of November, we have a day in the life of a DEA special agent featuring special guest Dr. Sean Lawyer, who's a
Excellent
in the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. And
last but not least, Layla, take it away on November 30th. And November 30th is our last show of the season, or as in academia, the semester.
Right.
But in show business, it's the season, right, Layla?
It is. Last but not least, we have our favorite. We have Ed Denso from Unfound. He's going to be talking about the Colonial Parkway disappearance. So I'm very excited.
Excellent. And I just want to shout out to Layla right now, as the vice president of Omega Tau, the chapter of Alpha Phi Sigma. Her work and Nicole Crimmi's work, they're revitalizing and bringing back to life, breathing life back into the chapter. That it's like we have a real active chapter now with members and everything. Do you want to talk about the induction? There's going to be an induction ceremony.
Sure. As far as induction will be happening next semester. But Alpha Phi Sigma is just a criminal justice society in which we want to promote our mission of bringing criminal justice awareness, but also just helping grow our community by volunteer service and everything like that. So, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much to both of you. I really appreciate all of your hard work behind the scenes. And, you make me look good. You make our school look good. You make the university and the college look good. And we love you. So I want one final thing, one final little plug here. Actually, one is an announcement and the other is a plug, shameless plug. So the announcement is to all of my students, whether they're PhD students, whether they are undergrads, whether they're in the special topics class, I don't care. You need to email me and let me know that you were here tonight, that you participated either in the chat or asked a question, whatever it was, so that you can gain your appropriate credit for that. Okay, so that's the announcement. The shameless plug has to do with the Stewies. I should really have Layla come on and do this, but I'll do it. The Stewies are coming up again. That's the Student Achievement Awards, and the sociodrama ensemble, Stage for Change, that does so much work in not only in the university but also in the community itself. And anybody who's familiar with the sociodrama group called Stage for Change, it would be wonderful if you nominated them for Stewie. The more nominations we receive, the better the chances of winning this year. Instead of being Susan Lucci, again, I'm dating myself. Nobody else knows what I'm talking about, but this was somebody who was always nominated and never won. But we will win this year. And so if you have nothing to do and you want to nominate a great student organization, go ahead and do that, because I think nominations are still open. Anyway, thank you to Dean Durham. Thank you to Dean Castro, Dean Kushner, all the deans that work at the Fischler College of Education School of Criminal Justice for all their support in all of the work that we do here in the School of Criminal Justice and in the college. And I want to say good night. Please be safe, and we'll see you next week.